Okay, welcome everyone for the concluding session of the conference today. I'm Mary Selkirk. I'm Vice Chair of the CCL Board and an Alameda chapter volunteer here in California. And thanks for joining us. Thanks to both of our speakers that are joining us, maybe especially Danny because it's a Saturday night on the East Coast. So thanks for being here. So just to give you a little sense of time we have about 45 minutes for this session. We're going to hear first from Danny Richter, who's Vice President of Government Affairs for CCL, who's going to give us an update, a legislative update from his perspectives right now. And Danny has said that he's most interested in doing a short presentation to leave as much time as possible for questions. So during the, Jennifer is going to kindly be, I'm going to be looking at the chat and curating for questions as they come up for Danny with help from Jennifer because I'm orthopedically challenged, so can't type anything in the chat. Then Danny will be with us for about 35 minutes until 5:45, and he will be followed by Tasha Reddy, who is regional coordinator for the entire state of California, who's going to do an update on from the state perspective. I believe, Tasha, we're not planning on taking questions for your talk. We'll see how that goes.
Correct, but if people want to take questions in the chat, please do that. And if you want to email the question to me directly, that works too.
Okay. And then finally, right around a little before 6, Tristan is going to give us all a preview of what is on the agenda for the conference tomorrow. So with that, Danny, I think I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you. Many of you know I'm from California. I still consider it home, so it's just really a pleasure to be with you. So I hope you find some interesting and useful things in what I'm about to say. There will be plenty of time for questions. But so far, 2021 has already been a pretty crazy year. A lot continues to shift in politics, and we're going to have to be unusually adaptable this year. For this presentation, I will talk about 6 politically relevant groups that we should be concerned with: the Biden administration, Republicans, Democrats, businesses, environmental groups, and environmental justice groups. For those 6 groups, I'll first talk about how I think they're seeing the world right now, and then I'll talk about how we, CCL, should interact with them. And the main takeaways I hope you'll come out of this presentation with are, number 1, a climate bill or package is coming this year because Biden is prioritizing it. And 2, what's at the core of that climate bill or package is not yet decided. And because it's not yet decided, 3, we get to make the case for what we want to be in it. So this is a special time for us as advocates. So to set the stage, let's take a moment to consider the body that all of these groups are going to have to deal with if they want to effect lasting change: Congress. This Congress, the 117th Congress, is balanced on the edge of a knife. Democrats hold the House and the Senate, but they hold the Senate by 1 vote. They can afford to lose only 4 votes in the House. So just to dig a little deeper into what that actually means, this means that though Chuck Schumer holds the gavel in the Senate right now, he is 1 untimely death. He is 1 scandal forcing a retirement away from handing the gavel back to Mitch McConnell. In the House, this means that if the squad doesn't vote for a piece of legislation, then Nancy Pelosi will need Republican votes to pass it. Second thing that I want to acknowledge here is that right now we're in what I've been calling CCL's lame duck. That is, after every Congress, you need to have all the bills go away. All the bills need to be reintroduced. And so far, Congressman Deutsch hasn't reintroduced the bill yet. So right now, there is not a bill to lobby on. So it's our lame duck. Right now, Deutsch still is looking for a Republican to be the lead co-sponsor on the bill. He would like to introduce it as a bipartisan bill. He also would like to introduce it early. So I don't know when it will be introduced. I don't know if he'll get that Republican. And I do recognize that not having a bill out makes many aspects of what we do, I'll say, awkward. And believe me, I understand it's awkward. But it is temporary, it was predictable, and it's something that every group has to go through. We'll get through it. So now let's talk about those 6 groups. Let's start with the Biden administration. Biden is moving quickly, and he is prioritizing climate at the top of the agenda. His 4 top agenda items are COVID, the economy, racial justice, and climate. I think that the priority of climate is likely to surface in the public discourse after this next COVID recovery bill passes. A version of that passed through the House this morning using the process of budget reconciliation. It will now go to the Senate, where I think that we can expect significant amendment. Now, reconciliation, this is something that a lot of us are hearing a lot about, so I want to just talk about that briefly. The appeal of reconciliation is that in the Senate, you only need 51 votes to pass something, as opposed to the usual 60 votes to get to cloture, that is to overcome the filibuster, by going through regular order. But going through this process, this reconciliation process, the cost of only needing those 51 votes, there are some significant limitations. Everything that goes through reconciliation needs to have some impact on the federal budget. Now, you can pass big things. You can pass things like Obamacare, like Trump's 2017 tax cuts, but it's inelegant. This process wasn't designed to accommodate big things like this. And so you have the stories that we have right now. For example, with this current COVID package, just on Thursday, the Senate parliamentarian said that inclusion of a $15 minimum wage violates the stringent rules of what can be included in a budget reconciliation measure. So by going through budget reconciliation, the Democrats are not going to be able to check off that priority. In another example, in 2017, just the title of Trump's tax cuts was ruled out of order, showing just how stringent the budget reconciliation rules can be, and how if you're trying to do something complex, something that is ruled out of order at the last minute can really throw a wrench into the works. So reconciliation is, if you're going to pass something big, it's clunky, and if you are trying to do something big, either party, whichever party is using it, tries to cram as much as they can into it, and that tends to make it a very partisan process. So much is trying to be done, so bent out of shape that you really do end up this being a very partisan process. And so what we're going to be focusing on at CCL, we're going to be talking with our members of Congress, not about reconciliation, we're going to be talking about going through regular order. Pushing through for something via regular order enables you to be more elegant with the solution. It enables you to be bipartisan, and it still queues up solutions to be cherry-picked for inclusion if reconciliation is the way that Congress goes. And so it doesn't really hurt our ability to have a voice at the table moving forward, regardless of where Congress goes with the climate, regular order, or reconciliation. So we at CCL, when we engage with our members of Congress, we're going to be thinking in a regular order context. And you can see an example of how what we're seeing is 2 tracks, regular order, reconciliation. You can see an example of how this is playing out right now with the Biden administration. You have the regular order COVID relief, the reconciliation COVID relief plan passing the House. Democrats are pursuing that. But earlier in this process, Biden had a robust discussion with Republicans about COVID relief. And I think he was serious about preferring a bipartisan bill to address COVID. And so you have this 2-track thing where there's a carrot and a stick. The carrot is regular order, the stick is reconciliation. And so I think that adds urgency, while at the same time keeping open the pathway for a more elegant solution that is better able to accommodate all the legislative solutions you might want to include. And because there's so many important parts of this coalition that Biden wants to keep happy on the issue of climate, I think we're very likely going to be talking about packages. Whether we're talking about reconciliation or regular order, I think we're talking about a lot of different policy ideas rolled into one. If you have a package of bills, that's going to enable Biden to keep the various parts of his coalition happy with whatever passes. Moving ahead, I expect Biden to continue talking about climate. I think that this will put pressure on Congress, on business, on other countries, on other environmental groups. And I think that this is fantastic. This is great that Biden's priority is our priority. It is, at this point, unclear what is going to be the backbone of Biden's climate agenda. It could be a carbon price. And a bipartisan Senate bill, particularly with multiple, I'm talking 3 or more Republican senators, would probably make a carbon price the favorite option to be the backbone. Alternately, a House bill with 10 or more Republicans. I'm not saying that this is the only way, getting a bipartisan bill with 3 or more Republicans in the Senate or 10 or more Republicans in the House to ensure that the carbon price is the backbone of Biden's climate agenda. But it's the closest thing to a guarantee that I can think of. The other pathway to get this to be the backbone of Biden's climate agenda is to convince Democrats that a carbon fee or tax is popular among their constituents and that they'd be bad politicians if they didn't listen to their constituents on this point. And so, of course, we're going to be trying both those. We're going to be trying to get that bipartisan introduction, and we're also going to be trying to convince Democrats that a carbon price is popular amongst their constituents. So right now, what we want to do with the Biden administration is we want to thank President Biden for prioritizing climate. We also want to say that a carbon price, and preferably a carbon fee and dividend, should be the backbone of whatever you do. And in fact, this is what our social media action is for this month. So if you check out our action this month, you'll be able to participate in this. So now let's move on to Republicans. Right now, there is a civil war raging within the Republican Party. You have Mitch McConnell giving a scathing speech about Trump, laying the blame for the Capitol riot at his feet, even though he just voted to acquit Trump of that in the Senate trial. You have Trump's direct attack on Mitch McConnell afterwards, calling him a political hack, and you have Trump threatening to form a new party. You also have, on top of this, a funding crisis. After the 147 Republicans voted not to certify the election, you had a lot of big funders of Republican politicians saying they were either not going to donate to those 147 or something like, we're going to pause our donations and assess. A week after those announcements, Sheldon Adelson, one of the biggest funders of Republicans over the past decade, over $500 million in donations to Republican causes, dies. And the fact of American politics today is that you need money to win elections. And so with this funding crisis, I think that Republicans are really looking at an uncertain way forward for how do they even mount modern political campaigns. Where is that money going to come from? So the main point of this is, for us who are trying to work with Republicans, the main point that I want you to take away from this is that it is extremely uncomfortable to be an elected Republican right now. They're worried, the party's in the minority, and it just feels terrible to be a Republican right now. If you're not putting yourself in your shoes, you might miss this. And so what we're seeing is an identity struggle. Some Republicans already want strong climate action to be a part of their identity, and it's going to be our job to accelerate those trends. And being aware that it's extremely uncomfortable to be a Republican right now, part of the reason it's so uncomfortable is because they have a lot of people shouting at them right now. And we can actually cut through that noise with our calm, respectful, appreciative style. We've already had examples of CCL volunteers having unusually long conversations with staffers, Republican staffers, in which the staffer says something to the effect of, "You're the only ones not shouting at us right now." So we want to look for those positive examples of Republicans moving on climate. We want to share that with Republicans to accelerate this trend, and we want to do so in the traditional CCL appreciative style, because that is what's cutting through the noise right now. Now let's move on to Democrats. And I'm going to specify Democrats on climate. Right now, I see 3 factions within the Democratic Party on climate. There is a carbon pricing faction, there's a regulations and standards faction, and there's a subsidies and incentives faction. Obviously, we want the carbon pricing faction to win. But I don't think we're really in a world where Democrats who are in one camp are not going to vote for a package that doesn't reflect their preferences. I think that these three camps, that those really reflect preferences, not lines they won't cross. I believe it is also true that no one has decided which of these camps will be the star of the show. Other environmental groups haven't decided, the Democratic leadership hasn't decided, President Biden hasn't decided. This is our opportunity. This is a huge opportunity for us. Moving forward, Democrats will be trying to make the most of their slim majority. They'll be looking to make Biden look good. They'll be looking to pass things through reconciliation, and they'll be looking to stick together. They can't afford to lose any votes. So our message to them is going to be carbon pricing is popular. Carbon pricing is quick. Carbon pricing is effective, and carbon pricing is durable. Carbon pricing is going to make Biden look good, both domestically and internationally. As your constituents, we want something that works fast. Energy Innovation Act starts in 9 months. That is big. Energy Innovation Act disincentivizes over 80% of our greenhouse gas emissions for everyone at a stroke. And we want something durable. Anything that's passed by Congress is not going to be able to be undone by the next administration. So those are our messages to Democrats. The next group, business, this is probably the most exciting group that I'm going to talk about because business is really stepping up in a very, very interesting way right now. I think part of what's driving this is certainly the makeup of the new Congress, the fact that something actually might move with Democrats in control. And another part of it, I think, might be what the EU, the European Union, and Canada are doing. The EU announced that on January 1st of 2023, their existing carbon price, the EU ETS, is going to have a border carbon adjustment. And so since the 118th Congress isn't sworn in until January 3rd of 2023, if they stick with this, that means that this Congress, the Congress we have now, is the only one that can make sure that when American businesses trade in the largest foreign market available to US companies, the EU, that they are playing on a level playing field, that the US passes a carbon price. This is the only Congress that can do that. For Canada, they are actually our largest trading partner. They announced that they're going to up their carbon price by 2030 to 170 Canadian dollars or 133 US dollars. And so I think that businesses looking at these, our biggest market, foreign market, potential foreign market, and our biggest trading partner, they're seeing that they're pricing carbon and they want a level playing field. We're also seeing some really impressive statements. The Chamber of Commerce on January 19th said that they wanted a market-based approach to climate change. Their spokesperson, Marty Durbin, said that a cap and trade or a carbon tax count as market-based approaches. You have the Business Roundtable recommending a carbon price. Even the American Petroleum Institute is getting in on the action. And I'm going to quote because this is so extraordinary to me. They're saying market-based policies can foster meaningful emissions reductions across the economy at the lowest societal cost. An example can be carbon pricing, balancing reducing greenhouse gases with flexibility and pacing to keep energy affordable. Now, I'm going to pause right there. I don't think any of us should believe that the American Petroleum Institute is going to go on the Hill and start lobbying for a carbon price. I don't think that's what this statement means. But I do think that this statement means that they're not going to fight it tooth and nail. And even that is a huge sign that we should make sure that businesses and politicians hear about. On the more general side, we see General Motors talking about selling only emissions-free vehicles by 2035. BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, pushing companies to disclose how they will survive in a world of net zero carbon emissions. And so lots of really exciting statements, lots of exciting stuff going on in the business world. And I just want to note that this is why we're putting carbon pricing in our Carbon Pricing is Popular campaign as opposed to fee and dividend. We can't use these statements unless we accurately reflect what they say. They're saying carbon price. And that is what accurately reflects their statement. We still want to use them. And so we're reflecting that language. We are still clear that in the carbon pricing world, our favorite is carbon fee and dividends. So I just wanted to say that's I know some volunteers have been wondering about that. So now what's our job? Our job is to make sure that remember that local businesses may be more important to your member than national businesses. And we're actually getting really good at getting local businesses to support the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. Mark reported on the February monthly call, we got 30 endorsements in a week. So even though this is CCL's lame duck, our volunteers have seemed to figure out a way around that lame duck and to continue to move things forward. Remember as well that local businesses care a lot about what national business organizations like the Chamber are doing. So share about the Chamber, share about the Business Roundtable, share about the CEO Climate Dialogues, share about the American Petroleum Institute de-escalation. Start by sharing this with existing endorsers, getting them excited all over again. Might actually be the best way to get your next endorsement. And if you get to the national level, please loop in Kyle Kameen, who's our new Senior Business Relations Officer in the DC office. For other environmental groups, our major sense is that they are uncertain right now. I think that their plans have been dependent on a Democratic wave, and so they're grappling with the current unsettled political landscape at least as much as we are, oftentimes more because they don't have CCL's laser-like focus on the climate and specific policy. Their position is not so well suited to such a finely divided Congress. And I know that some of you have been noticing that there is a subset of environmental groups that seem to be stepping back from a carbon price. And I think there's two elements driving this. One is growing unease with capitalism. That's element one. And the second element is that most environmental groups don't create political will. They shuffle around existing political will, whereas we bring new political will onto the table. And so I think that if all you're doing is shuffling around political will, you've tried that and you've determined that there's not enough political will on the table, and so they decide it's impossible. If that is true, if I'm right there, I think that that'll melt away when it's politically impossible. And so also with environmental groups, I think there's this interesting dynamic. Businesses are going onto the strategic chessboard at the same time that some environmental groups are stepping away from a carbon price. Who wins? I think it's probably business. I think the fact that all these environmental groups were for carbon prices for years before they are more recently against it, and there just aren't that many anti-capitalists on Capitol Hill. I think that business as business moves towards a carbon price, I think that resonates louder in Congress than the subset of environmental groups who seem to be moving away from it. So for us, where we see environmental groups trying to make the case that carbon pricing is unpopular, that's just a bad argument. And so we want to push back against that bad argument. We want to cite our sources. Carbon pricing right now is arguably more popular than it's ever been. So when we see that, let's push back. Environmental justice. This is the last group I'll talk about. They should be part of any discussion and as early as possible. My sense is that environmental justice groups will be looking to make progress primarily through regulations that Biden can implement. I do think that that's where their focus is as opposed to legislation. However, where legislation does move, they'll want to have a voice in the discussions, and I think they're going to get it. Looking at where Biden has made appointments, I think that EJ is already going to be at the table. So how does CCL orient ourselves to environmental justice? It's our job to build trust. Trust is really hard to build. And I think the way we build trust with environmental justice organizations is by showing up, taking orders, and not talking about carbon fee and dividend unless asked directly. There are just no fast routes to building trust. And one way that helps me think about this is with environmental justice groups, we need to be thinking about service, not about advocacy. Take our advocate hat off, and if you're going to engage with environmental justice groups locally near you, have on your service hat. So to conclude, it's a chaotic time. We need to be dynamic. I focused on 6 politically relevant groups: the Biden administration, Republicans, Democrats, businesses, other environmental groups, and environmental justice groups. The Biden administration is focusing on climate, and that's fantastic. It is extremely uncomfortable to be a Republican right now, but because virtually everyone is screaming at them, we can cut through the cacophony with appreciation and respect. For Democrats, they want to make Biden look good, and they haven't decided yet how to do that on climate. We want to argue that the thing that makes him look the best is a carbon fee or tax because it's fast, durable, and economy-wide. Business is shifting, and it's our job to get that message out, especially to Congress, especially to existing endorsers. A subset of environmental groups are moving away from a carbon price, making poorly referenced arguments that it's unpopular, and we want to push against that with well-referenced arguments that it's actually quite popular right now. And environmental justice organizations are an important part of Biden's coalition. I do think they'll get a voice at the table when legislation is being discussed. And we as CCLers want to engage with them at our local level, building trust, not by being advocates, but by serving. And so that's what I wanted to share today. And Mary, what are some of the questions we've gotten so far?
A lot of good questions. Thank you so much for that, as always, thorough and very precise summary. I think a couple of questions that fall into the category of how, as CCL members, we continue to approach Republicans. Do we continue to ask our members of Congress to join the Climate Solutions Caucus? But I think there was so that's one question, but then a more specific one came in from Pete in Long Beach. He's asked, how helpful can the 25 Republican members of Congress who joined John Curtis of Utah for his secret climate summit in Utah last week, how helpful can they be?
I think they can be extremely helpful. And so that's one of the existing trends that I mentioned within the Republican Party that we want to highlight and that we want to advance. So for those of you who missed that, there was a secret meeting in Utah, and it had 25 Republicans. Also last week, you had Mitt Romney saying that he was interested in looking at a carbon tax, carbon dividends, that he was interested in that. And so these are things. I think that anything the Republicans are doing on climate is something that we want to appreciate and we want to talk about more. And this goes back to the original motivation for the Climate Solutions Caucus. You want to get them on that first rung of the ladder of support. And the observation I made, certainly not with all the Republicans who joined the Climate Solutions Caucus, but with a lot of them, once they got on the ladder, they started to climb higher. And they had greater and greater ambition. And so I think that those 25 Republicans are on various points on the ladder. But by talking about it, if they get praise for that, especially from their constituents, it's going to feel good. It always feels good to be praised. And if other people are talking about it in a positive way, that also feels good, especially if you're a politician who lives or dies by being known, having your name known. So having your name known in a positive way on climate, especially by our constituents, that's going to be a good thing. Climate Solutions Caucus specifically, right now, I think the Senate Climate Solutions Caucus is already off and running. To be honest, I haven't seen enough commitment from Congressman Deutsch to the caucus that I can advise you to continue to ask for that. I don't know that it's going to work in this Congress in the House. I haven't seen Congressman Deutsch talking to Republicans nearly enough. So I'm just not sure that that's a good ask in the House right now.
Okay, thank you, Danny. And a follow-up question from Bob Archer. What's CCL's proposed approach with regard to the Senate fee and dividend bills right now, assuming those same bills are reintroduced? You did mention that we may have more traction with the Senate working group.
Yeah, well, I will tell you to tune in this week on Thursday when I'm going to be going over our primary asks and our supporting asks. And I'll give you a preview since you're here right now. I'll be talking about it more in depth. But in the Senate, for Democrats, the reality is we asked all last Congress to reintroduce the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, talk to Coons, and it was never reintroduced. And so I want to learn from that. I feel like making carbon pricing popular, making that case to elect Democrats is an imperative. And in the spirit of to acknowledge, to do justice to that imperative, we do know that the Democrats who introduced carbon pricing, there were 4 carbon pricing bills, 3 of them were fees or taxes. We're going to be encouraging you to ask your Democratic senators to co-sponsor one of those fees or taxes when they are reintroduced. We do know that they are going to be reintroduced early. For Senate Republicans, not applicable for this region, but for Senate Republicans, we will still be asking them to co-sponsor the Energy Innovation Carbon Dividend Act. That's still what we want, but any support on those carbon fees or taxes will enable us to say carbon pricing is popular to make that case. So that's a preview of Thursday.
Right. And thank you. And then on the other end of the spectrum, Jennifer asked, and bearing in mind what you had to say about CCL volunteers working with their local environmental justice organizations and really focusing on service rather than, campaigning for our bill. Jennifer, I think, raised a good question about the utility of promoting the benefits of income dividends and the income inequality benefits to the dividend part of the carbon fee and dividend legislation more explicitly than maybe we currently are doing.
Certainly we could. Again, so if you're going to be working with an environmental justice organization, I would only engage with that if you're asked directly. You don't, and I think that that's important for being in the spirit of service as opposed to being an advocate. Yes, I think that carbon fee and dividends is really good at addressing income inequality. There is a strong overlap between income inequality and racial inequality. But there is not 100% overlap. For some people, environmental justice advocates, and remember, I'm not an environmental justice advocate. You know me, I'm in CCL, and so you should always, whatever I say, take it with a good old salt lick, and remember that I don't represent EJ. But since I've been asked, you should always double check what I say with people who do represent those communities. For people who do represent those communities, it's my observation that for some, addressing income inequality will be enough. For others, you will need to explicitly address racial inequality. And so I think I'm talking about overlapping Venn diagrams. I think that the income inequality argument is our best argument, but I don't think we are going to have our best interactions if we ignore that. For a lot of people representing communities of color, in communities of color, racial justice needs to be addressed explicitly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. In an earlier, in his comments at the plenary early today, Representative Desaulniers mentioned that he's predicting that there'll be an infrastructure bill once the COVID relief bill, is passed, or is whatever. Hopefully, it's passed. How do you see carbon fee and dividend fitting into a possible infrastructure bill, or maybe carbon pricing more broadly, even?
Yeah, what I'm hearing in DC is that infrastructure is the headline, but that's going to be lumped in with climate, and so you're hearing this either as, so infrastructure and climate are going to be tied, and that's going to allow Biden to address that diverse coalition. And so when you hear infrastructure, part of that is that's really also about climate, whether it's regular order or whether it's reconciliation. And again, regular order is going to be the carrot, reconciliation is the stick. And so this year there is going to be a reconciliation bill. I think the discussion is really going to ramp up in the summer. I think it's going to come to a head in the fall. The main focus is going to be infrastructure, but part of that is going to be climate. Absolutely, there's a possibility of getting carbon fee and dividend in there. Remember, if we are in a reconciliation mindset or scenario, I don't think that we're going to be as effective as we can be if you're having conversations with your Democratic members saying, we want this to go through reconciliation. I think we want it to go through regular order. If they want to have the reconciliation discussion, I think you can have that. I think that that's fine. I think that you can look better, but we're gunning for regular order. That's what we want. And if it ends up in reconciliation, there needs to be some impact on the budget. And so, for example, I mentioned at the beginning of this talk that it's inelegant to go through reconciliation. The border adjustment, you can technically do a border adjustment through reconciliation, but some of the provisions that are in there that I think could easily be stripped out. The provision about the purpose of this bill is to protect animal, plant, life stuff. That is in there, so it's more likely to be legal under the WTO. If that gets stripped out, because it goes through reconciliation, it's more likely that you get a WTO challenge. And so that's a great example of what I'm talking about through elegant, inelegant. So I'll stop there.
All right, thank you. I think we have just time for one more question, and I'll turn it over to Tasha. A couple of people have been asking, and you mentioned this right at the beginning, since we're kind of in a lame duck mode right now. Yeah. How can we approach our members of Congress who've either co-sponsored the HR 763? How do we approach them now, or do we wait until we see new bills introduced?
No, approach them now. And California, you guys did great. I mean, you've got 27 co-sponsors on the bill. That's 51% of the whole California. The majority of the California delegation is a co-sponsor for the bill, which is incredible. And I think it's 31% of the, or no, it's 37% of the bill co-sponsors total are Californians. So A+ for California on that. And I think that what you want to do is you want to just check. So if you're going in there, you're meeting with a co-sponsor, just check, I want to confirm that when Deutsche introduces, you're still a co-sponsor. We're good. Okay, great. Well, we want to make sure that this is in the Biden policy. We want to make it popular. Invite somebody. Is there something you do to invite one of your colleagues who isn't on the bill to join? Did you know that 51% of the California delegation was on it in the last Congress? It's always, you can say things like that. So check to make sure the co-sponsors who are on there are ready to be co-sponsors again, and then see if they're willing to invite somebody else to be on the bill. If they're not a co-sponsor, ask them to co-sponsor and point out, did you know that 51% of the California delegation co-sponsors this last Congress? Why were you in the 49%?
Excellent. All right. So, thanks, Danny.
Mary, we could take one or two more if Danny has time.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
Let's see. There's lots of stuff going on in the chat. Broad question. Do you think it's realistic to expect that a carbon fee and dividend bill can be passed with 60 votes?
Remember, the 60 votes is just to get to cloture. It's not for the bill. Right. So you can envision Republicans splitting their vote. You could have Republicans who vote for cloture, but then they vote against the bill itself.
Got it.
So that's an important nuance to remember. I think that right now I don't see the votes, but remember, business. That's a really big deal to have the Chamber of Commerce weighing in, to have BlackRock weighing in. Business hasn't been this active on something this big for climate in over a decade. And with the funding crisis going on within the Republican Party right now, and a lot of that funding comes from businesses. Some of those businesses are saying carbon price. So I don't know that we see the votes right now, but if it does happen, it's going to happen because of that confluence of businesses stepping up just at the same time that Republicans funding so they can carry out their races are uncertain. And you have pre-existing trends within the Republican Party moving the whole party towards greater action on climate. So it's a leap. It is a leap, but it could happen. And regardless, I don't see any problem. I don't see any penalty for us talking about a regular order process. I don't think that hurts the chances of a carbon price being in the reconciliation discussion at all. I think that the way we're structured, I think we have a lot more traction as constituents if we're talking about being strategic through regular order. That's how we should. Let's say you get a regular order bill and we're able to get those 3 Republicans in the Senate or those 10 Republicans in the House. If a carbon price is cherry picked and put into reconciliation, this big old inelegant monstrosity of a bill, we'll be able to point to the Republican support and say, this piece, the carbon price piece of this reconciliation bill, that has bipartisan support. And so even though the reconciliation bill only passes with Democratic votes, we're going to have an easier time defending the climate part of that. That's not going to be the main thing that Republicans are going to be able to attack, because on the standalone regular order bill, it got bipartisan support. So those are some of the, that's why I think we're really well served by talking about regular order.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, that's probably good.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks all.
Tasha, thanks so much. Tasha, you want to take it away?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I am Tasha Reddy. I'm your regional coordinator for the state of California. So good to be here today with all of you. I'd like to start today with hope because I am hopeful. I am hopeful for the future, that we can have a beautiful, livable world. I am hopeful because I have all of you here by my side. I am hopeful because over 1,600 people registered for this conference. I am hopeful that Congress can heal and advance and put a price on pollution this year. I'm hopeful because I found CCL and I know that when we work together, our voices elevate. I am hopeful because I am part of an organization that leads with admiration, gratitude, and respect. An organization that encourages us to move outside of our comfort zones, that does not aim to the right or to the left, but to the far middle. I am hopeful because I've been raised in and live in California, a state that may lead the way to a better clean energy future. I am hopeful because every day I get to work with you guys, liaisons, group leaders, California state coordinators, and thousands of extraordinary volunteers from across the state. I'm hopeful because we have a big solution that can scale to the size of the problem. And finally, I am grateful because CCL has brought me hope again. So a question I get a lot is what's going on with our senators? So I'm happy to say that we have a team of Senate liaisons, one person for each district office and each of the DC offices, and we meet monthly to plan and organize. Our Senate strategy right now includes a couple things, including we'd like to get op-eds in small papers. We got that information from one of our senator staffers that's a good way to get us and our ideas in front of the senator, because when they're briefed in the morning, they often get those op-eds from small papers. So I'd like everyone on the call right now to think about how they may contribute to that idea. We'd love to have more Republicans calling our Democratic senators. The senators represent all of us, not just the people who voted for them. And then it would be great if all of us were taking part in the monthly calling campaign, also abbreviated MCC, where you get a reminder email once a month, and then you go ahead and call your representative and your two senators. So please, I encourage all of you, you could do that this evening if you're not already signed up, you can sign up. We have an amazing team of California state coordinators. I'm going to just list them off. They all do incredible work for CCL in our state, and we would not be able to do any of this without their presence and hard work. Our California Conservative Coordinator is Craig Preston. Our Heartland Coordinator is Jennifer Wood. Our Liaison Coordinator is Alexa Foster. Elizabeth Fenner is our Group Leader Coordinator. Connie Young is our North and Central Coordinator. Judith Ashton is our South Coordinator. And Stuart Collins and newly Nikki Robinson are our North Coordinators. So if we were all there in person, we could give them a big round of applause, but we aren't. So some of you are wondering how many people registered for this conference. The final tally as of 5 p.m. yesterday, for Saturday, we had 1,576 people registered, which is incredible. And then for Sunday, we had almost as many at 1,344. So this is a huge accomplishment. This is the biggest regional conference ever for CCL. So it's really great, and we couldn't do it all without all of you here today, showing up, learning, and being inspired, taking action. Another smaller accomplishment, but it's also important, is this March Lobby Day. We have lined up appointment setters for every district in our state, and most all of those appointment setters are also constituents. So that is gigantic. We have lots of goals, but I'm just going to name a couple goals and kind of hopefully get some wheels turning in your head of what might you be inspired to work on. We'd love to have someone from every congressional district in DC the next time we go to DC. We would love to have a meeting with each California office next time we're in DC, or well, actually that can be a goal for June Lobby Day, which will be virtual. So yes, a meeting in with every office. We would like to get more support for the bill from the left. And we had a couple of sessions today that are helping our effort there. Would be great to get a Republican under 40 in every chapter. And it would be great to get, 20 or so Republicans from California to go join us in DC the next time we are there. And another big goal, which is much more of a reach, but still I will put it out there, we could get a California Republican co-sponsor of the bill in the House. That would be pretty exciting. Okay. So the pandemic has put a lot of things on hold, and I just wanted to mention these two really quickly of programs we had. Well, we had the travel ship program. Many of you are familiar with that one. So raising money to help young people from purple and red districts travel to DC. So we need people to help us by making donations, and we need young people from those districts, young people from those districts to apply and travel to DC. So that'll be resumed next time, hopefully it looks like November, fingers crossed there. And then we also have an annual story contest. So the next time we gather in DC, we'll pick that up as well. The storytelling is such a powerful tool, and we want to bring that out and collect some amazing stories, because I am sure you guys out there have some really amazing, inspiring stories. Okay. Let's spend just a moment on the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, HR 763 in the previous Congress, 116th. We had, I think it was mentioned earlier, 86 co-sponsors. So I guess Danny stole my thunder on this one a little bit. We have 27 from California. So the quick math is that's roughly 30% of the bill sponsors are Californian. We actually also had 3 original co-sponsors, Anna Eshu, Judy Chu, and Scott Peters. Okay, so I'm not going to read all the names of all the co-sponsors, but I am going to list the district numbers. And so if you're out there in your living room or your kitchen, your office, and you have space to stand up, I encourage you to stand if your district is called so we can acknowledge you. So here's the list. 24, 14, 11, 28, 48, 13, 39, 49, 31, 45, 33, 53, 37, 25, 30, 46, 40, 38, 07, 51, 32, 29, 35, and 03. So big round of applause for everyone in those districts that made that happen. Okay, and I'll just end with a few quotes. You guys know me, that I like to read quotes. Usually I would be reading this to a big audience in a ballroom or a theater, and you'd be guessing who said each quote, but that's not going to work right now, but I'll read the quote still. Okay. Don't give up. Our country needs you now more than ever. This is the pivotal moment in the history of our country. Our ideals are at stake, and we have to fight for who we are. So think for yourself. Do you know who that is? So that's Kamala Harris. this one sort of gives it away, who it is in the middle of the quote. We're going to combat climate change in a way that we have not before, Mr. Biden said in the Oval Office on Wednesday evening, just before signing executive orders. Even so, he cautioned, they're just executive actions. They are important, but we're going to need legislation for a lot of the things we're going to do. Okay, let's see if you know this one. Yeah, your story is what you have, what you will always have. It is something to own. That one's Michelle Obama. Yes, very good, inspiring. The late George Shultz is quoted as saying this: "We argue for revenue neutrality on the grounds that this tax should be exclusively for the purpose of leveling the playing field, not for financing other government programs or for expanding the government sector." We will miss George Shultz dearly. And we will also dearly miss Marshall Saunders. I'm going to end today with a quote of his. Many of you have heard this quote before. It goes, "Constancy is my favorite virtue. So many people will go on for a little while and get excited for a year or two, but it is really constancy that gets things done." So with that, a big thanks to everyone who helped out. Extra special thanks to Heath Massey, amazing job co-leading the program team. Bryce Rasmussen spearheaded our publicity effort and did so much more. Kathy Orlinsky is our CCL conference organizer extraordinaire. And Tristan Miller, she went beyond, above and beyond, organizing all of this amazing job, and so many others I can't name. I don't have time to name right now, who poured energy into making the conference a success. So let's take a moment and do a virtual thank you for everyone who made this happen. You can do your little reactions too. Okay, and yep. With that, I will pass it over to Tristan, who's going to tell us about tomorrow's sessions.
Thank you, Tasha. And I guess one of my favorite quotes from Marshall Saunders is, "We can't sit around waiting for the cavalry to ride in and save the day, because we're the cavalry. We are the citizens who have become activists, and we become lobbyists in every sense of the word." So we want you to come back tomorrow for more. This has been one of our most ambitious regional conferences to date, with over 27 unique sessions and keynotes and plenaries that have featured, 80 speakers and moderators. I'm not kidding. That is how many people have joined us and will join us tomorrow. Tomorrow's a deeper dive into workshops. They're going to be covering climate advocacy training, empowering your ask, which I hear is amazing, standing up for racial justice, youth action networking, because the youth need to organize and work together in 2021. We also have an incredible session with Eve Simmons, and that's magnifying your message. And it's a great media workshop. It's one of our 5 pillars, as Tasha was talking about, is getting this in the story, getting op-eds, getting the press to cover this bill and climate action. And speaking of climate action, our plenary is focused on climate champions. So we're going to be meeting with Irvine's Mayor Farrah Khan, who ran on climate and won on climate. We also have Jackie Spear, Congresswoman, who just worked with our youth action team. And we have a great video from her that you don't want to miss, as well as Congressman Lou Correa. And also we put together a great email that you're going to get tomorrow morning, which is your Zoom link guide. And it's going to cover which sessions have which Zoom. There's also an Inroads Climate Solutions Model training and how you can use it. So there is a lot to come back for tomorrow, as well as a really cool session, unique outreach opportunities for 2021. And so we're going to see you there. Come back at 1 o'clock tomorrow on Sunday, and we will do this all over again. So we'll see you then.
Awesome. Thanks, Tristan. Thanks, Tasha. Thanks, Danny, if you're still on the line. And
Yeah.
thank you to everyone who joined us for this amazing day of
Yeah.
information and action.
Yeah, if you're new to CCL, we hope you'll click on this link that I think Jennifer Wood's going to put in the chat for us, because we would love to work together, because we can't afford for this moment in time to pass and not get some climate legislation passed. The time is now. So come back tomorrow, get rested. Thank you so much for, making this the biggest, best conference ever here in California. And have a beautiful night, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you, Tasha, for such a beautiful message of hope and all the cool updates. And my kids can't wait for me to, make them dinner.
Love it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
All
you.
right.